Here's another interesting Navamsa chart. At first glance, this looks like a really powerful chart. We've got Mars exalted in the Lagna, 7th Lord Moon in its own sign. Now, most astrologers would jump to the conclusion, simply because of those two factors, especially that 7th Lord in its own sign, this person would get married and live happily ever after, real simply. Because most people, when they look at the Navamsa, they look at the 7th house. That's what they focus on. But as we know, that's not the important house in the Navamsa. The important house in the Navamsa is the 9th house. Okay? Now, the 7th house is the 11th house from the 9th house. So it's what we gain from the Navamsa. Okay? Now, what do we gain from the Navamsa? What do we gain from that 9th house, that commitment to a path? Well, we get a partner if the commitment is marriage, a lifetime partner. But that's not the foundation of it. That's just another result of the Navamsa, a natural result of the Navamsa, of the 9th house. But that's not the thing of the Navamsa. The 7th house is the thing of the Saptamsha. Okay? So this is a good example of how we don't want to really jump to conclusions just based on the 7th house in the Navamsa. Okay? So we'll look at this chart carefully, and we'll simply just start with the most important planet, which is Venus. Venus in the Rashi chart is conjunct the Sun. Okay? So we know that Venus is going to be agitated in all the Vargas. Just how bad it's agitated will be dependent on its strength of the Sun and strength of Venus. Venus in the Navamsa is in a natural neutral sign. So he's not anything particular. He's sleepy, but not sleeping unconscious. Just sleepy, but doesn't have really a lot of power. He's not in a natural friend sign or natural enemy sign. So he's not delighted and he's not starved. Okay, he's agitated by the Sun though. The Sun is in a natural friend sign. So it's in a better dignity than is Venus, who's in a natural neutral sign. So we see the Sun is going to starve Venus. And so Venus is, the Sun is going to agitate Venus. So we don't have a great Venus to start out with. Then Venus is aspected by the Moon to 41 points. Okay? That's a strong aspect of its enemy Moon. And anytime Venus gets aspected by the Moon, being overly emotional, and being emotionally changeable, which is nature of the emotions, can impact your relationships though. Because Venus is a goal-oriented planet. The Moon is not a goal-oriented planet. It's a total live-in-the-moment planet. And as feelings change, what we want in the moment and what feels good changes. But that's the nature of the Moon. That's how the Moon's supposed to be. Because it helps us with other things because of that. Now, Venus is a planet, it's a female planet, so it does live in the moment, but it lives in the moment also with the consciousness that this is the moment that leads to the next moment, and we want that next moment to be wonderful and have a goal with it as well. So Venus is a planet that wants fulfillment like the Moon does, but it does it in a more goal-centered way. It does it in a way that, okay, this is the path I'm choosing because this gives me a long-term sense of happiness. And along the way, when there's some difficulty, Venus can adapt and adjust and bear the burdens that comes, okay? And heal and things like that as it's necessary. So it's more long-term. So the Moon, an enemy of Venus, aspecting Venus strongly, stars Venus, which means Venus doesn't get that long-term fulfillment that comes from sticking to a path. Okay, why is that in this person's chart? Because the 7th Lord is the 7th Lord, which is the desire for relationships. So this shows that one of the things that hurts this woman's ability to have marriage is falling in love with other men. Basically being fickle with her affections. Okay? And deciding that the guy's not right for her because the Moon will change. Okay? And then this Venus is agitated. So her feelings about the person will change as she meets other people that seem better. Then the Sun is agitating Venus too. So it's a starved and agitated Venus so far. Then Venus is influenced by Mars in neutral and Jupiter neutral. Has no friends upon it. It's a terrible, terrible Venus, basically. There's nothing good to it at all, unfortunately. Okay? Mercury and Saturn are in positions where they can't help Venus. They don't aspect them. So it's an unfortunate Venus. Right away we know marriage and choosing a path and sticking to a path are not going to be an easy thing for this person. And that's a large degree why this person at the age of 40 years old or 39 has yet to be married. Even though they have an exalted planet in the Navamsa Lagna, and even though they've got Moon in the 7th in Navamsa, they're yet to be married, because one reason is that Venus makes it hard for them to find long-term commitment and to find the value in long-term commitment. It's agitated and it's starved. Okay? Now, this is a woman. She happens to be a really, really attractive, really, really nice person, the kind of person that everyone gets along with. You know, women like her and men like her. Everyone likes this person. They're just a really likable, easy to get along, extremely beautiful person who at the age of 39 has not managed to get married. But because it is a woman's chart, we want to also study Jupiter, because that's always the husband, the man. Jupiter, unfortunately, is in Libra sign where it's sleeping. So Jupiter doesn't have any strength by himself. Jupiter is starved by being in Venus' sign, and Venus is sleepy, so it can cause some damage to Jupiter. So Jupiter is not doing well by himself. He's useless by himself. Okay? Fortunately, Jupiter has some friends. He has the Sun helping to 12 points, and the Sun is in a natural friend sign, so that's 12 points of useful help. He's aspected by Venus, but Venus is already trashing him because Jupiter's in Venus' signs. He's influenced by neutral Saturn. But then, in the Rashi chart, Jupiter is conjunct the Moon and Mars. So, and again, look at that nice Moon, Mars, Jupiter conjunction. That's what gives this person a really, really likable personality. Okay? 3 friends all together in the 2nd house. You know, it's hard to find a nicer person than that. And then Mercury in the 4th house from the ascendant as well. So, you know, really, like I said, a nice, nice person. But anyway, got distracted there. Okay, the Jupiter is conjunct 2 friends, the Moon and Mars. Mars is exalted, Moon's in own sign. So Jupiter has a lot of help from his friends. Okay? But Jupiter is a deficit to begin with. What does this mean? Well, Jupiter being bad by himself, sleeping, shows this woman's going to tend to find herself with men who aren't completely worthy. Okay, they're a weak Jupiter in the Navamsa in a woman's chart means she falls in love with the wrong type of men. Now, because the Moon aspects, and the Moon's a friend, and because Mars aspects, and Mars is a friend, that helps her deal with the weaknesses of the man, and helps life deal with the weaknesses of the man. One of the weaknesses will be dealt with by the Moon, which is the 7th Lord, which shows the man she falls in love with, though having lots of weaknesses that keep them from being, you know, a man that makes the relationship work. They're still a really sweet, forgiving, kind, good-hearted man. And that's the kind of men she's drawn to. She doesn't fall in love with, you know, with men who are not nice and abusive or anything like that. She just falls in love with men who aren't really pulling their weight, and things like that. Okay? And then Mars is the other planet that aspects Jupiter as a friend. And this helps her be simple in her relationship needs. Like I mentioned in the previous chart, we saw a strong Mars. Someone who's not going to be overwhelmingly needy or demanding. Someone who will be logical and sensible in her relationships. And someone who knows how to get along with other people, which a good Mars indicates in the Navamsa. So those 2 things will help Jupiter. So overall, Jupiter ends up being pretty good. So that can help with marriage possibilities. Okay? And Jupiter becomes more important in this chart because it rules the Karaka, Venus. So we know Venus is trash and is not going to be able to give marriage. So the next question is, can the Lord of Venus give them a strong path? Well, Jupiter can't do it very easily because he's he is sleeping, but with the help of his friends, he could possibly do it. Okay, so we're going to keep that in mind while we keep looking. So we've looked at the planets that are most critical. Now let's look at the bhavas. The ninth bhava is the most important bhava. There's no planets conjunct the ninth bhava cusp in the Rashi. In the Navamsa, or let's look at it aspects. Aspects to the ninth Navamsa, or ninth bhava, are the sun in a great friend sign to 9 points, so it helps. Moon to 25 points, so it helps. Mars exalted to 41 points. Mercury in a friend sign to 56 points. Okay. Jupiter in a neutral sign, so not hurting it. Venus in a friend sign, so helping it. The only planet that's hurting it is Saturn to 34 points. All the other planets are helping it. So it's a good ninth house. So the person believes in marriage, and marriage, that helps the chance of marriage being given. We just have to find the right dasha. Okay? The ninth lord Mercury is in an angle. Good place for Mercury. And let me jump back a step. The Venus, the Karaka, is in the 12th house. Not a good place to be for finding a path that you can stay on. Mercury, though, the ninth lord's in an angle, in the 4th sign from the ascendant. Mercury is first it's in a natural neutral sign, so it doesn't get any delight or starvation. It's influenced by its enemy Moon, neutrals Mars and Jupiter, and neutral Saturn. So you see, Mercury is actually starved, unfortunately. So while the ninth house is good, the ninth lord is not good. What does that mean? Well, that means they can have a marriage because the ninth house is good. But Mercury can't give it because Mercury is bad. Okay? What planets can give marriage? Maybe the lord of Mercury. The lord of Mercury is Mars. Mars is exalted. Cool. Mars also aspects the ninth house to a heavy dose of 41 points. Great. Mars is influenced by his friend Sun and 2 neutrals. And then it's conjunct Jupiter and Moon. Jupiter sleeping in the Navamsa, so he can't help Mars, but Moon is wide awake, so he helps him a lot. So Mercury can't give marriage, but Mars certainly can. So now we finally found a planet that can give marriage, okay? Let's look at the other important house, the third bhava. Third bhava is ruled by Jupiter, who's sleeping, but overall a delighted planet. It's starved on one account by Venus, but then it's delighted by the Moon and Mars. So it's a good planet all in all, okay? So it's it's a decent planet overall. Then the third house itself is influenced by the nice strong Moon, by exalted Mars, by neutral dignified Jupiter, and by enemy sign Saturn. So we see the third house has got 33 good points to 16 bad points. And Mercury conjuncts the third cusp, and Mercury's in a friend sign. So that gives us another full measure of 60 points of benefit to the third bhava cusp. So it's a great third bhava. Like I said, the girl really knows how to get along with people. They work well with people. No problems there. Okay. So we found some good things, and I pointed out some afflictions. And so the question is, well, she's 39 years old, and she's not married. Okay? And why is that? Well, when you see some good stuff and bad stuff, it's going to give both in the life. When it gives what depends on the dasha influence, right? Okay, so they grew up in Rahu dasha from a young age of basically they weren't even old enough to date until Rahu started. So they didn't have any love interest, any dating until Rahu dasha. Now, what's the chances of Rahu getting them married? Rahu, we know, can always get a person married, possibly, right? If it's well situated. Well, in the Navamsa, Rahu's in the 12th sign. Not good. Rahu's Lord Jupiter has some problems. Rahu's going to give the results of Saturn. Saturn's the one planet in bad dignity in the Navamsa chart. Saturn's the one planet that's hurting the 9th house of marriage. And Rahu's in the 12th house, a bad house for marriage, a non-giving house. So it gives more loss of marriage. So Rahu Dasha can't get him married. Now, if Rahu had been in a different sign, okay, for instance, if Rahu had been in a different house, like her twin sister, okay, who was born 7 minutes earlier, okay, Rahu's actually in a different sign from the ascendant in the sister's chart, okay, and so Rahu actually was more favorable for her because Rahu can give, and it's 7 minutes and something, I don't remember the exact time, but anyway, what I'm wanted to point out here, Rahu is going to give the results of Saturn, which is bad because it's hurting the ninth house, the one planet hurting the ninth house, and the one planet in bad dignity. Rahu is going to give the results of Jupiter too, okay, which is bad but has some good stuff. But Jupiter overall has more good stuff, but still Rahu can't give marriage. Why? Because he's in the 12th sign from the ascendant. If he'd been in a different sign from the ascendant, in a better house, in an angle or trine, then Rahu would have much more readily have given, a marriage. Okay, so I'm stressing the point that Rahu gives the results of Jupiter. Jupiter's bad, but he has some strength to it. Why didn't Rahu do it? Because he's in the 12th house, where it's just not a good place for Rahu to give marriage when there's any bad news at all. So Rahu Dasha isn't able to give marriage. Then we get on to Jupiter Dasha. Can Jupiter give marriage? Well, Jupiter rules Venus the Karaka. He's in the 10th house, the best sign in the chart, the 10th sign from the ascendant. But he's sleeping there. But he's conjunct two super strong friends, the Moon and Mars. So that lets us know that Jupiter can give marriage when he gets help by his friends. Okay? Jupiter Dasha ended at approximately 32 or something, 32, 33, something like that. Or Rahu Dasha ended. So now they've gone to a Dasha they could possibly get married. Jupiter can't do it because Jupiter's starved. Saturn can't do it because Saturn is a planet, it's a neutral to Jupiter. It's the one planet in bad dignity who's aspecting the ninth cusp to 34 points. So Saturn can't do it, and thus it didn't. Mercury is an enemy of Jupiter. Now it only influences Jupiter to 1 point. Mercury is the ninth lord, so it has a similar agenda. Jupiter rules the Karaka of marriage, Venus. Mercury rules the ninth house of marriage, so they both are geared towards marriage. However, Mercury, we've seen, is starved by the moon and is just a neutral's dignity. So Jupiter-Mercury can't do it. Okay? Can Jupiter-K2 do it? Well, K2 gives the results of Mars, a friend of Jupiter, but unfortunately it's also going to give the results of Mercury, which is not going to give it. So I wouldn't put my money on Jupiter K2. Then we go into Jupiter-Venus. Venus is in the 12th sign. It rules Jupiter. Venus is starved by the moon, and it's agitated by the sun. Not a chance that it's going to happen then. In fact, that's a period of a relationship termination, if I've ever seen one. And like I said, Jupiter-Venus periods love to take away a loved one through death or separation. So no chance of marriage happening in Jupiter-Venus. Then we go to Jupiter-Sun. Sun is a friend of Jupiter. So now for the first time we have a friend of Jupiter. But the Sun doesn't have any other marriage points in the chart. It doesn't have any other, it's not geared towards marriage in any other way. However, and it's in the second from Jupiter, not the best place. The best place isn't when the Antardasha Lord's on an angle or trine is best. Other houses aren't as good. So the Sun's not going to have steam to give marriage. Then we go to Moon. The Moon has steam. It's the Moon, right? It's the 7th Lord in the Navamsa. Okay, it is in good dignity. It's helping Jupiter. It happens to be the Dara Karaka, meaning the planet with least degrees in the chart, in its sign, the Dara Karaka here, the Gemini Karaka of the spouse. So specifically a planet that represents the spouse. So now we have things lining up. It's in the 10th sign from Jupiter. The moon is influenced by its friend Sun and its friend Mercury. It's a great moon. So on Jupiter moon, they're going to no doubt meet the person they're going to marry. Okay? But I don't actually expect them to get married in Jupiter moon. Okay? I expect them to meet their spouse in Jupiter moon. Why not actually get married? Because there's not a strong ninth house thing going on. And also because the stronger period happens next, which is Jupiter-Mars. Mars is the exalted friend of Jupiter. More importantly, Mars, or just as importantly, it's going to boost Jupiter as a friend, but Mars rules the ninth lord Mercury. So ruling that ninth lord Mercury, it has a big agenda towards marriage. And it's exalted. Okay? And it rules the fourth Baba cusp in the Navamsa. Okay, remember I said about 4th and 10th Baba cusp loving to give marriage in the Navamsa in a woman's chart? So Mars is really stacked towards marriage. It's helping Jupiter, who rules the Karaka Venus. It rules the 4th Baba cusp. It rules the 9th Lord Mercury. And it's really the best planet in the chart. It's exalted and it's conjunct its strong friend Moon. Okay. The Moon is conjunct two neutrals. Jupiter and Mars are its neutrals. So these two planets are not helping the Moon, but the Moon is helping them. Okay? So Mars is really an awesome planet. Mars also happens to be the 7th lord from Jupiter. Mars also happens to rule Mercury, the 9th lord from Jupiter. So we see how it just compounds what's going on. So Jupiter-Mars is when they'll actually finally get married at the tender young age of 45. Okay? And so this is a really interesting chart because, like I said, this girl is really kind, not a social phobe at all, not neurotic at all, really sweet, nice person, very attractive, who the dashas have conspired against her actually tying the knot with somebody, and she's 39 now, and in my opinion she has a long way to go still. Okay, this will be a fun chart to review down the road when she actually meets that guy in Jupiter Moon and marries him in Jupiter Mars. So it's just interesting how sometimes these things can just take so long. Now the other thing too about this person's chart, you might have noticed they've got Rahu in the first house. Rahu in the first house is indicating the destiny of somebody who's working to develop themselves as an individual. It's not so much a social destiny, it's a more self-destiny. Now Rahu matures at 42, meaning at 42, that's when they've got the grips on that part of their destiny. The next planet that matures after Rahu is Ketu, which matures at 48. So from the age of 42 to 48, a person always tends to get more focused in sort of balancing that Ketu and Rahu dynamic. Okay, and getting ready to really embrace Ketu. Okay, so Ketu, of course, is in the 7th house. So we have them moving towards a more social destiny after becoming more solid in their individuality, which was Rahu in the first house is all about. So when they finally meet this person, they'll be solid as an individual and really at that point ready to have a real partnership with someone. Because the difficulty with Rahu and Ketu in the 1st or 7th house, it's hard to have a real partnership where one is really themselves and really in a partnership that complements themselves. They really aren't able to fully do that until after Rahu matures, which is at 42. So now they'll be able to do that, or by the time they meet their spouse in Jupiter Moon. Okay? So some other interesting things about this. This person is mostly Deva. We look at lots of Rakshasa too, but the Lagna, Moon, Mars, Mercury, and Jupiter are all in Deva, Nakshatra, Navamsa, sorry. Jupiter's doing okay, Mercury's doing bad, Mars and Moon are doing good. So it's sort of a mixed batch of good deva and difficult deva. This person, you know, definitely has a vibrancy to them, um, that you would expect someone on the deva path, someone who can easily bring joy to people they're around. But they also have, if you look in their eyes, you see a little bit of loss in their eyes, like a little bit of confusion, I guess I would say, which you often see in devas. Lots of times devas, you just look in their eyes, you can just tell they just feel a little bit lost. They have this vagueness in their eyes, something that's not directly, concretely grounded. And this person has that because of the predominance of deva influences. And you'll see they only got a little bit of Nri influence, just the sun, just a teensy little bit. Then they have two planets. I don't usually count Rahu and Ketu so much. You've noticed about their deities. They're just not that important. The planets' deities are the important ones because those are the conscious planets we're working with. Venus and Saturn are in Rakshasa. All the rest of these are in Deva. So they're very much a Deva-natured person. A little bit of loss, a little bit of confusion. And why is that? Well, because they've been running Jupiter, which is has been difficult so far, because Jupiter hasn't had any help from its friends yet. It's not going to start getting help from its friends until 2015 when Jupiter Sun kicks in. Until then, the dashas are of its neutrals or enemies. So Jupiter right now is operating as a difficult deva. And, her path will be much more clear, and it'll be a deva path of her bringing something, beautiful and useful to Earth. Won't really mature until Jupiter Sun, when it gets some friendly influence. And really not a lot until we get into Jupiter Moon and Jupiter Mars. So this period of this woman, when she finally meets the guy she's meant to marry and she marries him, it's going to be a really important period for her as a person who's predominantly deva, because so far the deva energy is there, but it's been lost and hasn't found its direction, which will be coming later for this person. So a difficult chart in a respect because of the way the dashas unfolded and the fact that Rahu's in the 12th house. And Rahu dasha is never easy if you have it before the age of 42. It always leaves you more confused and more lost. And then Rahu's in the 12th sign from the ascendant in this chart, which makes it worse. And its lord is sleeping. And it's giving the results of Saturn, the only planet in bad dignity in the Navamsa. So you see how there's a lot of these small subtleties, which are basic bread and butter techniques, but a lot of them that are coming together to make the planets that, some planets a big enough problem that's going to take some time until the right dasha comes along before the good planets can give their fruits. And the good planets you see at a glance, Mars and Moon, wow. You see those at a glance. But they haven't had their run yet. Okay, when they do, it'll be great, but they just haven't had it yet. Okay? Unfortunately, after Jupiter dasha ends, she will unfortunately go into Saturn dasha, right? Some of you guys might have been thinking about that. Saturn is in an enemy sign, and therefore it's only hurting houses and aspects. Fortunately, it's in a natural neutral sign. Then it's hurt by enemies Mars, Moon, and Sun, and helped a little bit by Mercury and Venus. But it's hurt more by the other planets. So Saturn is a little more starved. It's 60% starved and 40% delighted. So are they going to wed happily ever after? No, they're not, because Saturn dasha is just not going to give it, unfortunately. And Saturn's in the 12th house. So the marriage will have happiness for a couple of years, but once Jupiter Rahu starts, the problems will really start creeping in. And once Saturn comes in, they're just going to get worse and worse. So overall, it doesn't look like it's going to be a happy story, again, because of the way the dashas unfold. If only they'd gotten the Sun, Moon, or Mars dasha, at the marital time of life. If they'd gotten those, Sun, Moon, Mars, that's, 20 years of dashas between those three. That would have been good marital dashas. Unfortunately, they're just not getting those dashas. After Saturn, they're going to go into Mercury, Like Mercury, they go into K2. After K2, they go into Venus. They're just not going to get the good dashas. So a lot of life is, when we look at the chart, is the potentials, and there's some potential for good, marriage in this person's chart, a happy marriage. It's there. There's also potential for dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, the dashas are giving the dissatisfactory centered planets throughout her life. Mars dasha, was before she was even dating, when she was just a kid, wasn't going to help her with marriage, unfortunately. Okay, but it did show that she really felt like she had a place in the world during Mars period. It was a very, very happy period for her. But it's sort of all been downhill since Rahu dasha started for them. And you're also seeing the Rashi chart. Rahu's in, the Lagna. Saturn's in the 6th. The Lagna Lord in the 6th is an indication of divorce or relationships ending. Just basically relationships ending, whether they're marriage or not. It's another point where the marriage path gets broken up because of what they have to do. Because the first house is what we have to do for ourselves. The 6th house is the house of losing your partner, because it's the 12th from the 7th, the house of partner. So the Lagna Lord in the 6th shows a path where the things you have to do for yourself causes you to lose your partners, unfortunately. Okay? And that's the dasha she grew up in. So, in respect to marriage, a hard, arrangement of dashas. Okay, let's look at some of the other things based on the little handout we got here. Lagna's Navamsa. Okay, their Aquarius is their Lagna, and we can't really read this degree. I think it got cut off, but we can figure it out really easy. Well, it's between 1620 and 20 minutes of, or 1620 degrees and 20 degrees of Capricorn. That's the 6th Navamsa. And we can figure that out by, wait, is that right? Oh, I'm sorry, that's the Navamsa degree. No, that won't work. To do it right, okay, it's Aquarius. Aquarius Navamsa start at Libra, right? At Libra. So the first Navamsa was Libra, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So we're in the 4th Navamsa of Capricorn, which means this is 1149 up here. So we're in the 4th Navamsa of Aquarius, sorry. So looking up the 4th Navamsa of Aquarius. I'm sorry, that's not, I don't give results for that. Let's look at the Lagna's Navamsa, which is Capricorn, right? I believe. Yes. One born in the native of Capricorn Navamsa will be short-bodied, fickle-minded, mischievous, less bold, unfortunate in regard to wife, and enjoy greatly. His 19th, 27th, 34th, 49th, and 68th years of age will bring diseases. So have said the sages. Well, let's see. Well, we already know they've had bad luck with wife or spouse. But we've seen the reasons why. It wasn't just a simple little thing. And enjoy greatly. Well, this person enjoys life. They've had a lot of other benefits in their life, and they enjoy them thoroughly. Okay, so they're not the kind of person that, because they don't find a marriage, that they sit around unhappy. They enjoy every day of their life. Okay, but also they've got this great, strong Mars, which Mars loves going out into the world and doing things and being active and enjoying life. So you see, those things are really better explained otherwise. Okay. These dates here, I'm not so sure of, to tell you the truth, because I haven't dealt with this person with respect to health, even though I've known them, for years and years and years. Health has never come up of anything that I've heard about. So unless there's something they've told me about, these things don't come up. Mischievous, not necessarily. So again, don't find this to be that accurate. These old books that say, well, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, it's going to be a bad Navamsa, so they say some bad things. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, they say some bad things about it. So, when they have these techniques that are just based on a planet being a benefic or malefic, they're never sound techniques, okay? That's like this really overly simple way of thinking, okay? More readily, we could just tell the Lagna Lord Saturn is in a neutral sign in the 12th house. Saturn is influenced by more enemies, by Mars, Moon, and Sun, than it is by friends, Mercury and Venus. So it's a little bit more of a starved thing, a starved Saturn. So there's going to be some areas in life where they're not finding fulfillment, more so than where they are finding fulfillment overall. And that would be a really accurate interpretation, rather than trying to find these, to use these weird principles or these weird interpretations. Okay? All right, let's look at the moon's Navamsa now. In the Rashi chart, the moon's in Pisces, and it's in the first Navamsa of Pisces, which is Cancer Navamsa. So let's go to Pisces. Go to first Navamsa. Pisces is born a pale man having the appearance of calm water. His hair hangs down, his nose is handsome, his eyes are black, his shoulders are broad and beautiful, his arms are thick and long, and his belly is small, a graceful man. Not a real accurate description of this person. Okay? It's just these just don't work that great. I don't care what Ayanamsha you use, whatever zodiac you use, you just don't find these interpretations being real consistent. Okay? Now again, what are these really telling us to do? To try to relate the planet that the moon's Navamsa, to look at the sign in the Rashi and the sign in the Navamsa for the moon, and combine that with the influences or aspects to the moon. And then we can come up with our own better interpretation. Now here it says the moon's in the Navamsa of, where is the moon in Navamsa of moon? Let's see. If the moon's in its own Navamsa, which is where it's at, let's see the aspects to the moon. The strongest influence to the moon is Saturn at 39 points. So the moon in its own Navamsa, aspected by Saturn, is a clever person who's wise in all his activities. So that's a person with a level head, maturity, we can say, who's clever, who can see through things. Well, that happens to be true for this person. Okay? The moon in its own Navamsa is going to make the person very aware of what's happening, because it gives a strong moon, right? It's the moon, and the moon is what tunes us into the whole world. So a nice moon, by being in its own sign, the Navamsa, is going to make us really in tune and pay attention to what's happening. Things just won't slip by us. Then Saturn lets us know that there's consequences to things that we do. When it aspects the moon, the person realizes there's consequences in life. And so that's going to make a person clever, who's going to pay attention to when something's out of sort. They're going to see through it. They'll be clever. And they'll be wise in their activities, which means they'll take the pains to do things that make sense, because they know there's going to be results to what they do, and they don't want to do things that are going to lead to trouble. And this is true about this person. They are like this. Okay. But is afflicted by sorrow arising from bondage and wandering. Well, that's true as well. The person hasn't been as settled as they want. There's an element of loneliness as a result of that, which is something we always have when Saturn influences the moon. It makes a person more lonely, because Saturn's a cruel planet, right? And also suffering from bondage. Well, Saturn influencing the moon can make you feel stuck if it's the strongest influence in life. Okay, and that's so in this person as well. So when we start adding things like, that are influencing the moon, we get the broader picture. The other part of the picture is Mars and Jupiter are both conjunct the moon. Okay, Jupiter always gives a person a sweetness and kindness and the nature of forgiveness. Mars makes a person somewhat more strong-minded in their ideals and opinions of what's right to do. So this person, sticks to her word. She sticks to her convictions. So those are all things we get when we add these other planets. So rather than using these crazy interpretations that these old books give, it just works a lot better to take the principle of, okay, to look at the moon, we have to see where it's at in the Rashi. It's in Pisces, the sign of Jupiter. Well, moon in Pisces is easygoing placement, a relaxed person, a person who can go with the flow, a person who's not pushy. But then we add the fact that the moon's also in Cancer. Now we get a person who knows what they need and knows what they want more, much more than does the average Pisces, because moon in Cancer really knows what it needs in its heart. Okay? Then we add to that the strongest influence to the moon is Saturn. And we get a person who is a little more serious about their actions because they know they're going to have repercussions. So they try to choose wisely. And a person who, what was the word that sutra used? I actually kind of like that word. Aspects to moon. Okay, clever. They're paying attention, and so they can't get fooled or tricked. They're clever because of that Saturn. Makes them more aware of the negative possibilities out there, and they're clever and able to avoid those or work with those things. Then on top of that, we got the conjunction of Mars, which is going to make them more stronger-minded, more firm in their convictions, which is the nature of Mars, but not pushy, because Mars is in Pisces. It's all Pisces. Pisces is never going to be really pushy, but it'll be stronger in its own conviction. And Pisces can be very strong, but it's never going to be strong in an aggressive way. Pisces is strong in a passive way. It gives passive strength, which is feminine strength. And of course, Pisces is a feminine sign. And then we have Jupiter influencing the moon, which gives the person, will have them just have more happiness and feel happier and be more open-minded. Now, Pisces and moon in general is open-minded, and we put the moon on top of it, we get a really open-minded person. Okay? But yet one who's strong with their convictions, which is Mars, and will approach to new things in life that Jupiter and Pisces makes her open to, with a sense of logic and common sense that's developed from her own intelligence and experiences, okay, which is Mars. So there's a lot going on to this person's moon, and it's all quite nice, really, okay, which makes him a likable person. And then it's in a friend house, the house of friends, which is the second house. So they're caring about people. And this person, will help somebody out. Like they're the kind of person that, one example was they saw somebody stuck on the side of the road. They stopped. Turned out to be a guy. They gave the guy a ride into town so he can get back with some friends and get his car towed or whatever. She's a totally stunning, beautiful girl, So of course the guy totally falls in love with her, but she handled it very gracefully. She wasn't interested that way. She handled it gracefully without hurting his feelings or being critical or unkind. And it turned out very nice, And, she was able to do it in a kind letdown. A lot of women who are that attractive would never even think about stopping to help a guy stranded on the side of the road because they just don't want to deal with the guy falling in love with them, But that never entered her mind. She's just a really kind, caretaking person, which is a quality of nice planets and a nice combination in the second house. And then she also has all of her planets in 4 signs, 1, 2, 3, 4, not including Rahu and Ketu. And anytime a person has planets in 4 Rashis in the Rashi chart, that's Kadara Yoga, which makes a person want to do good things and take care of things and be nice in the first place. It's a nice yoga. So those things combined make this person a really person who loves helping other people without any thought for herself. So anyway, there's a lot of influences to the moon, and we need to read all those influences. We can't just go and say, well, the moon's in the first Navamsa of Pisces, and then we go read the moon in the first Navamsa of Pisces, and we say that there are born a pale man, have the appearance of calm water. His hair hangs down, his nose is handsome, his eyes are black, his shoulders are broad and beautiful, his arms are thick and long, and his belly is small. Not really. the person's shoulders are actually a little more narrow. Okay, they don't have broad shoulders. Okay, their arms are not natural, thicker or longer than average. Their belly is not smaller than average. None of these other things really work out. Okay, what works out is when we look at read the chart. Okay, so interpretations are just good for us trying to understand an idea that we have to pay attention to the Navamsa of the moon and recognizing that planet will, the lord of that Navamsa will influence the moon. In this case, it was the moon. Okay? For some reason, what they said about grahas and Navamsas works a little bit better. Mars in Saturn Navamsa is an evil pauper delighting in destroying wealth. Okay, well, here's the one where it doesn't really work out. Mars is exalted in Saturn Navamsa, right? So that can't be a really negative position, but they give it because it's Saturn. But how we can look at that, an evil pauper delighting in destroying wealth, is that Mars in Capricorn Navamsa and Saturn Navamsa is not going to be concerned about wealth. Wealth is not going to be something that they're going to measure people by or measure themselves by. And they'll just throw it out if it doesn't suit them. So there's lots of ways you can destroy wealth. Like if a person says, well, these are your options. You can do what I'm asking you, or else I'm going to take your allowance away. Well, this person would just say screw it and walk away without their allowance. Okay? Or if their husband said, well, if you fight me in the divorce, I'm not going to give you anything. She would just say, all right, I'm out of here, keep it all. She just wouldn't care about the money. Okay? And that's the nature of this person. They don't measure things or choose their actions based on wealth or money. So they're just as easy to just destroy it all as they are to keep it in certain situations. Venus in the Navamsa of Jupiter, a strong, courageous man who is preeminent in the city of the best poet or the best poet. So we know that Venus in the Navamsa of Jupiter is going to be in a neutral dignity. Okay, but it's still, we've got benefics, meaning they're two nice planets, Venus and Jupiter together. So that can make for some good, apparently good qualities. Okay, strong and courageous, who's preeminent. Well, what are the motivations behind all that? What's the motivations to shine when Venus is in a neutral sign? Well, it can be good or bad depending on the other influences on Venus. Okay, but in general, Venus and Jupiter sign is only so-so for helping Venus being productive in a predictive sense. Okay, if it has some aspects of friends, it can show some good qualities of character that help the person become more successful and known. But if it's a starved Venus, it will have a greater desire to be known than is realized. Okay, Venus is a very social planet. You drop in the Navamsa of Jupiter, and Jupiter wants to expand things. It makes you want to be known. Okay, is a simple way you want to look at it. And it'll make you get in touch with more people as well. You'll be more socializing. You'll know more people who can help you get ahead and be your friends to get ahead. That's only going to happen if Venus is capable of producing by being in good Lagitati avastas. Okay, so again, we always have to look at the Lagitatis. Mercury was in the Navamsa of Mars, a thief and a killer of men. Well, this person just isn't like that. That's because Mars is a malefic. On the chart we did yesterday, things worked out nicer with this interpretation. In this chart, we're sort of falling apart today. A thief and a killer of men. Well, in one way we could say she's a killer of men, in the sense that she dumps her boyfriends every once in a while, okay, and breaks their heart. And because she is really beautiful, they do pine away after her. And because she is really kind, they totally do pine away because she's outside her dashes that she's running, she'd be a really wonderful catch for most men because she is a great girl in lots of ways. But she's still a thief and killer of men. So this just means she's outspoken. She, does what she thinks she needs to, and if that breaks a man's heart, so be it. And that's not really a negative thing. More importantly, is again Mercury's Logitates of Ashtas. Now, in her chart, we saw Mercury was in a bad Logitati of Ashta. So that means there's a neglect of friendship with her potential partners or marriage partners. And when she decides she's not going to marry them, she's not going to really remain friends with them because the relationship isn't founded on friendship. It's nice to have a good Mercury in the Navamsa because it helps create friendship between the two people. So this person will be a killer of men, meaning they'll ignore friendship when it comes down to it. It won't be the thing that keeps them there. Okay? And because of that, when they break off with the guy, they break off with them quite seriously. Okay? Sun. Sun is in the Navamsa of Mars. A hero who steals the property of others. Well, a hero who steals the property of others is simply a warlord that can go out and rape and pillage back when raping and pillage was normal, because he's a hero, right? Who steals the property of others. So this just shows someone who's very capable of getting what they need to get. And, when they need it, they won't be that concerned about other people they're hurting. Now, we've seen in this person's chart, the sun was influenced by Mars, a friend, but then starved by Saturn, and then starved by Venus because it's conjunct. So it's a bad sun in the Navamsa. We didn't really get to that because we didn't really talk about the sun much, but it's a starved sun in the Navamsa because it's conjunct Venus, and then it's in a watery sign, so instead of being starved by Saturn, it's thirsted by Saturn. But it's a bad sun, and that has to do again with consistency and steadfastness along their path, whether it's a path with a person or somebody else. And that sun being weak hurts that, unfortunately. Okay, now luckily the sun wasn't any of the critical planets in the Navamsa, but it's still going to put a weakness into the Navamsa, but it's not going to make or break things. It'll just give a less strength to the commitment, any commitment she makes. And it was in the Navamsa of Mars. A hero steals the property of others. Well, that'll make her less heroic and less capable of doing what, getting what she thinks she wants, because Mars, sun is just weaker there. And the sun is the king, and sometimes, and it's a cruel planet. A strong sun can be cruel. That's the nature. In fact, if you look at people who have got strong planets, in lots of ways they'll be more cruel than people with the malefics being weak. So if Sun, Saturn, and Mars are exalted, it'll make a person crueler than a person who's got those three planets debilitated. Because the cruel planets make us do what we have to do. And they'll make us not care about how it hurts us, but also they'll make us have less care about how things affect other people. Okay, so it's not like those cruel planets treat anyone differently than they treat oneself. But that's just how they look. That's just how life is. Life is hard. What of it? Get used to it, is their attitude. And that can come off as a bit of a cruelness. When the sun has more weakness, like this is not a strong sun, it makes it really hard for the person to be cruel at times, harder with the sun. So they're not so much this description, simply because the sun is starved. It's not a strong sun. Jupiter in the Navamsa of Venus, a counselor with a noble wife. Well, we know that's not true, right? Again, these old books are just assuming Jupiter is a benefic, Venus is a benefic. Two benefics is a good thing. But we know from Parashara that's not necessarily true. Venus gets starved in, Jupiter is starved in a Venus sign. So no, they don't have a noble wife or a spouse so far in Jupiter Dasha, and they won't until Jupiter helps them out. Okay, or until Jupiter's friends helps Jupiter out. The interesting about Brihat Parashara, it doesn't have these type of interpretations. Most texts, this is what they've got. Just the Saravelli and all these other books, just these type of interpretations one after the other. Parashara doesn't do that. He just gives the rules, the principles, and the calculations. And then we're supposed to figure out how to use them. How do we use Logitates? How do we use Shadbala? How do we use Ishta Kashta? and Shubha Ashubha Phala. How do we use all these crazy things? And he gives very, very few of these type of interpretations. Most of the interpretations he gives are based on Dasha and Bhukti. That's when that text really gets into interpretations. And the interpretations themselves are a little loose, but the principles behind them are what you want to try to dredge out of those. Anyway, that's for another time. Saturn's in the Navamsa of, where was Saturn? It was in the Navamsa of Jupiter. One whose wealth comes from the accomplishment of evil deeds. Okay? Because we got Jupiter, which is wealth, and Saturn, which is evil deeds, relating to each other. They figure it'll make one's wealth come from the accomplishment of evil deeds. Again, they're just given a bad Navamsa. Now let's look at Saturn's signs. In its own Navamsa, produces a man of bad character, who's enriching wives and sons. In the Navamsa of Mars, a murderous man who delights in evil. In the Navamsa of Venus, a man addicted to the posture and work of women. In the Navamsa of Mercury, an artisan who is without independence. That's the best one. You're an artisan, but you've got no independence. You're like a servant. In the Navamsa of Moon, one who seduces women and then abandons them. In the Navamsa of the Sun, a slave who has many diseases. And Navamsa of Jupiter is bad too. So Saturn's bad no matter what Navamsa it's in. Meaning if you have Saturn in your horoscope, you're basically screwed, right? That's what this statements are telling us. That Saturn is always going to cause trouble in any Navamsa it's in. Give me a break. That's foolishness. They're just giving bad interpretations to Saturn because Saturn's an evil planet, and according to their rules. Now, in this person's chart, Saturn's not great, as we've seen. So it's not going to be good for Saturnian things, which means detachment will not be great enough in the Navamsa to support marriage life. Okay, you have to be a little detached. And Saturn gives us that detachment and also the perseverance to hang in there when things are uncomfortable or unhappy. Their Saturn won't really help them with that. But we have to read Saturn as a planet. All planets are a good, useful thing, even Saturn. We get the good, useful stuff if the planet's in a good Logitariya Vashta. And if it's in a bad Logitariya Vashta, we're not able to get the good stuff of that planet. Instead, we do lots of stupid things with that planet and have lots of problems in our lives. It's really just that simple. So all these cookbook type recipes, sometimes they're accurate. Most of the time they're hit and miss. But it's important to know this is how the old books are for the most part. Which ones aren't this way? Well, the two main ones that aren't this way are Brihat Parashara and Jaimini Sutras. And those are books that were ignored until the last 200 years. Literally, those books have been totally ignored. Most of Vedic astrology, the textbooks that have gained more prominence, like two of the most famous are Saravali, which is written by the father of the person who wrote some of this stuff, Brihat Jataka, which Saravelli is based on. And these type of interpretations just never work that well. The stuff that's good from those old books are like Yavana Jataka has interpretations, like the moon's Navamsa according to Yavana Jataka, which I've been criticizing. But the imagery of the Horas and the Drekanas that we were given in Yavana Jataka really work nicely. But see, it's my belief that those images of the Vargas that they have in those old texts are images that have been carried down through a very, very long time. They're a very symbolically rich image. And that these interpretations are the interpretations that the astrologer who wrote the book decided to write down. So they don't have a history before that book. They're just the astrologer decided to write this down. So, Yavana Jataka decided that if the planet's in a bad Navamsa of a malefic, it's bad, and if it's in a Navamsa of a benefic, it's good. And the person, Yavana Jataka, when it came to the planets, bad planets and Navamsas of malefics will give trouble, benefic planets and the Navamsas of benefics will give good stuff. Astrology doesn't work that way, because that's defining everything from the beginning as good and bad. And that's not how it is. Planets aren't good or bad. Planets all have useful aspects. Some planets are required to be used in difficult ways, Saturn, Mars, and Sun. Other planets are meant to be used in the nice things of life, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus and waxing moon. But any of those planets can do anything. It's like Venus can murder a person as quick as badly as Mars. How does Venus murder you? Feeds you a nice meal that's poisoned. It's a great way to die. Have the most tasty food in your life and then you keel over dead. Mars is just going to go over there and stick you with a spear. Either way, the planet is a destructive force in that example. But in what way the destruction comes in a very pleasant way, and another way it comes in a very evil way. Or as a more crude example, a person can be seduced by a woman who's an assassin who cuts his throat. He gets murdered by Venus. Another person gets murdered by Venus because Venus runs him over in the shape of a car. So you see, those things can always be a source of destruction. Now, Venus is a benefic, so it naturally represents things that make life more comfortable, such as women and love and affection, whether it comes from men or women, and vehicles, which make it more comfortable to get around on. But those things can become negative forces. Anything can become a negative force. Okay? Saturn rules hard things. Well, hard things oftentimes can be a positive influence in our lives, meaning they can help us in life. So the medieval idea of Vedic astrology is there's benefics and malefics, and that determines whether the planet's going to be a giver or taker. And Parashar does not follow that view, and that's a really erroneous view. Benefics make things comfortable, malefics make things uncomfortable. That's true. But comfort and discomfort are not the same as constructive and destructive. So we have to look at the Logitati of Vasta to see if a planet's going to be constructive or destructive or in the middle ground somewhere. Okay? So you can play with these interpretations. I just wanted to show you how we could use them to try to get some meaning. Worked better in the last chart than today's chart. Never worked great on everything, and it never will. We have to learn to read the charts. And we do that by studying Avastas and things like that, and studying influences upon other planets. Okay, I think that